Okay. Chapter 5 from Gaston Bachelard's Water and Dreams. Chapter 5 Maternal Water and Feminine Water. And as in ancient times, you could sleep in the sea. Paul Eluard, Necessities of Life. 1. As I have indicated in an earlier chapter, Marie Bonaparte explains Edgar Allan Poe's attachment to certain extremely imaginary scenes in terms of his very early childhood memories. One of the sections of Madame Bonaparte's psychoanalytic study is entitled The Mother Landscape Cycle. Inspired by this psychoanalytic investigation, we can readily see that the objective features of the landscape do not suffice to explain our feeling for nature if it is deep and true. It is not knowledge of reality that makes us love reality passionately. It is feeling, the first and fundamental value. As for nature, we begin by loving, the first and fundamental value. As for nature, we begin by loving it without knowing it, without really seeing it, by actualizing in things a love that has its basis elsewhere. Then we search for its details because we love it as a whole without knowing why. The enthusiastic descriptions given of it are proof that men have looked at it with passion and the constant curiosity of love. And if the feeling for nature is as durable as it is in some people, that is because in its original form, it is at the root of all feelings. It is a filial devotion. All forms of love have in their makeup something of the love for a mother. Nature is for the grown man, Madame Bonaparte states, an immensely enlarged eternal mother projecting into infinity. Emotional nature is a projection of the mother. In particular, Madame Bonaparte, the sea is, for all men, one of the greatest and most constant maternal symbols. And Poe offers a particularly clear example of this projection, this symbolization. To those who object that Edgar Allan Poe, as a child, could very well have discovered the joys of the sea directly, to the realists who misunderstand the importance of psychological reality, Madame Bonaparte answers, the real sea by itself would not be enough to entrance humans as it does. The sea sings a song which reaches them on two different levels, the higher and more superficial of which is the less appealing. It is the deeper one, which has from time immemorial drawn men to the sea. This underlying melody is the maternal voice, the voice of our mother. It is not because the mountain is green or the sea blue that we love it. Even if we give these reasons for our attraction, it is because some part of us, of our unconscious memories, finds that it can be reincarnated in the blue sea or the green mountain. And this part of us, of our unconscious memories, is always and everywhere a product of our childhood loves, of these loves which in the very beginning went out only to the one who was our source of shelter, our source of food, who was our mother or our nurse. To sum up briefly, filial love is the first active principle in the projection of images. It is the ability of the imagination to project an inexhaustible force that seizes all images and puts them in the most reliable human perspective, the maternal perspective. Other loves will come, of course, and be grafted onto the first ability to love, but none of these loves will ever be able to destroy the priority of our first feelings. The chronology of the heart is indestructible. Later, the more metaphoric a love or friendship is, the more it will need to draw its strength from the one fundamental feeling. Under these conditions, to love an image is always to illustrate a love. To love an image is to find, without knowing it, a new metaphor for an old love. To love the infinite universe is to give a material meaning, an objective meaning to the infinity of the love for a mother. To love a solitary place when we are abandoned by everyone is to compensate for a painful absence. It is a reminder for us of the one who never abandons. As soon as anyone loves a reality with all his soul, then this reality is itself a soul and a memory too. I'm going to try to link up these general remarks by beginning with the perspective of the material imagination. We shall see that the one who nourishes us with her milk, with her own substance, puts her indelible mark on the very diverse, distant, and external images, which cannot be correctly analyzed in terms of the usual themes of formal imagination. In the main, I shall show that these highly valorized images have more matter than form. To prove this, I shall make a somewhat closer study of the literary images that aim at compelling natural waters, river and lake waters, even sea waters, to take on a milky appearance and metaphors of milk. I shall show that these absurd metaphors illustrate an unforgettable love. As I have already mentioned, all liquid is a kind of water for material imagination. This is a fundamental principle of material imagination, which requires that one of the primitive elements be at the root of all substantial images. This remark has already been justified visually and dynamically. For the imagination, everything that flows is water. Everything that flows participates in water's nature, as a philosopher would say. The epithet flowing, water, is so strong that it creates a substantive at all times and in all places. The epithet flowing, water, is so strong that it creates a substantive substantive. The epithet flowing water is so strong that it creates it's substantive at all times and in all places. The epithet flowing water is so strong that it creates its substantive at all times and in all places. The color matters little. It only provides an adjective, only designates a variety. Material imagination moves immediately to the substantial quality. If we now pursue our quest into the unconscious a little further by examining the problem from a psychoanalytic point of view, we must say that all water is a kind of milk. More precisely, every joyful drink is mother's milk. Here we have an example of an explanation at two levels of material imagination, at two successive degrees of unconscious depth. First, all liquid is a kind of water. Then, all water is a kind of milk. The dream has a tap root that descends into the great, simple unconscious of primitive child life. It also has a whole network of hair roots which live in a more superficial layer. It is this superficial region where consciousness and unconsciousness mingle that I have studied most often in my works on the imagination. But it is time to show that the deeper zone is always active and that a material image of milk underlies the more conscious images of the waters. The first axis of interest form around an organic concern. It is the nucleus of this organic concern that provides a focal point for adventive images. The same conclusion could be reached by examining the way that language is progressively valorized. The first syntax obeys a sort of grammar of needs. Milk is, then, the first substantive in the order of liquid realities. More exactly, it is the first substantive known to the mouth. Let me note in passing that none of the values associated with the mouth is repressed. The mouth, the lips, here is where we know our first positive and specific happiness, the place where sensuality is permitted. The psychology of lips deserves an extended investigation in its own right. Under the cover of this sanctioned sensuality, let me delve a little deeper into psychoanalytic regions and offer some examples to prove the fundamental nature of water's maternity. From all evidence, it is the directly human image of milk that is the psychological basis for the Vedic hymn quoted by St. Teves, the waters which are our mothers and which desire to take part in the sacrifices come to us following their paths and distribute their milk to us. It would be a real mistake to see in this passage only a vague philosophical image of thanksgiving to the divine power for the gifts of nature. The bond is much more deep seated than that, and I feel that a literary image should be given the absolute integrity of its realism. It might be said that for the material imagination, water like milk, is a complete food. The hymn cited by St. Thieves continues. Ambrosia is in the waters. Medicinal herbs are in the waters. Oh, waters, bring all our remedies for disease to perfection, so that my body may benefit from your good offices, and that I may for a long time see the sun. Water is a milk as soon as it is extolled fervently, as soon as the feeling of adoration for the maternity of waters is passionate and sincere. When it impresses a sincere person, the hymnal tone retrieves the primitive Vedic image with strange regularity. In a book that purports to be objective, almost learned, Michelet communicates his view of the sea and discovers quite naturally this image of the Milky Sea, of the vital sea, of the nourishing sea. These nourishing waters are thick with all sorts of particles of fat suited to the soft nature of fishes who lazily open their mouths and breathe, nourished like an embryo in the womb of a common mother. Do they know they are swallowing? Scarcely. The microscopic food is like milk that comes to them, the great fatality of the world. Hunger is reserved for the earth. Here it is prevented, unknown. No effort is needed to move. There is no search for food. Life must float like a dream. Is this not, by all evidence, the dream of a satisfied child, of a child who is floating in his well being? No doubt Michelet has rationalized, in many ways, the image which enchants him. For him, as I have stated above, seawater is mucus. It has already been worked and enriched by the vital action of microscopic beings that contribute those soft and fecund elements. This last word, fecund, opens up a profound view of sea life. Her children, for the most part, seem to be photises in a gelatinous state who absorb and who produce the mucus matter, fill the waters to overflowing with it, give them the fertile softness of an infinite womb, where new children endlessly come to swim as if in a warm milk. So much softness and so much warmth are revealing features. Nothing suggests them objectively. Everything justifies them subjectively. The greatest reality corresponds first of all to what one eats. Seawater soon becomes, for Michelet, pan-biological vision. Animal water, the primary nourishment of all beings. Finally, the best proof that the nourishing image governs all the other images is that Michelet does not hesitate to continue on the cosmic plane from milk to the breast, with its assiduous caresses rounding the bank, the sea, gave it a maternal form, and I was going to say the visible tenderness of a woman's breasts. What the child finds so pleasant, refuge, warm, and repose. In the curve of which gulf, before which rounded cape, could Michelet have seen the image of a woman's breast if he had not first been won over, caught up in the strength of material imagination, in the power of the substantial image of milk? For such a daring metaphor, there is no other explanation. It is matter that governs form. The breast is rounded because it is swollen with milk. Michelet's sea poetry, then, is a reverie that inhabits a deeper zone. The sea is maternal. Water is a prodigious milk. The earth prepares in its womb a warm and rich food. On its banks swell the breasts that will give all creatures particles of fat. Optimism is a kind of abundance. 3. It may seem that to affirm this immediate adherence to a maternal image is to pose the problem of images and metaphors incorrectly. To contradict me, make sure I'm right. To contradict me, some will insist on the fact that certainly mere vision and contemplation of the spectacles of nature also seem to elicit direct images. Some will object, for example, that many poets inspired by a tranquil vision tell us of the milky beauty of a peaceful lake reflecting the light of the moon. Let me then discuss this image so often encountered. Let me then discuss this image so often encountered in the poetry of waters. Although apparently unfavorable for these theses on material imagination, it proves in the end that the influence an image exerts over poets, so different from one another, must be explained in terms of matter, not forms and color. How, in fact, can we conceive in physical terms of the reality of this image? In other words, what are the objective conditions that cause this particular image to be produced? For a milky image to arise in the imagination before a lake sleeping in moonlit light, the moonlight must be diffused, water rippling just enough not to reflect the moonlit surroundings starkly. In short, the water must go from transparence to translucence, must gradually become opaque and opalescent. But this is all it can do. Is this really enough to make poets think of a basin of milk, of the farmer's wife foaming pale, of objective milk? It does not seem so. Then it must be confessed that neither the principle nor the power of this image lies in visual stimuli. To justify the poet's conviction, the frequency and the naturalness of the image, it is necessary to integrate into the image component parts that are not seen, components whose nature is not visible. These are precisely the parts through which material imagination will be made manifest. The psychology, a psychology of material imagination alone, can explain this image in its real totality and life. Let us then try to integrate all the components that set this image in motion. What is this image of milky water really? It is the image of a warm and happy night, the image of clear and enveloping matter, an image that takes air, water, sky, and earth, and unites them. A cosmic image, wide, immense, gentle. If we really live this image, we recognize that it is not the world that is bathed in milky moonlight, but the spectator who bathes in a happiness so physical and so reassuring that it brings back memories of the earliest form of well being, of the most pleasant of foods. Therefore, the river's milk will never be frozen. A poet will never tell us that the winter moon pours milky light on the waters. Warmth of air, softness of light, and peace of soul are necessary for this image. These are the material components of the image, the strong primitive components. Whiteness never comes until afterward. It is deduced, introduced, like a adjective brought along by the substantive and after it. In the realm of dreams, a word order that makes a color white as milk is misleading. The dreamer first perceives the milk. His sleepy eyes sometimes see its whiteness only after. Concerning the question of whiteness in the realm of material imagination, there are surely no objections. If a golden moonbeam falls upon a river, a formal and superficial imagination of colors will not be disturbed. Surface imagination will see as white what is really yellow because the material image of milk is intense enough to continue its gentle progress into the depths of the human heart, to accomplish its task of realizing calm in the dreamer, and to embody a happy impression in matter and substance. Milk is the first sedative. Man's calm impregnates contemplated waters with milk. In Elegies, St. J. Perse writes, "Now these calm waters are milk, and everything which overflows in the soft solitude of morning. A foamy torrent, however white it may be, will never have such a value. Color, then, is really insignificant when material imagination dreams of its primitive elements. The imaginary does not find its deep, nutritive roots in images. First, it needs a closer, more enveloping and material presence. Imaginary realities evoked before being described. Poetry is always a vocative. It is, as Martin Buber would say, in the thou category before being in the that category. Thus, the moon is in the poetic realm, matter being before form, matter being before form. Thus, the moon is in the poetic realm, matter before being form. It is a fluid that penetrates the dreamer. Poetry is always evocative, vocative. Poetry is always evocative. It is, as Martin Buber would say, in the thou category before being in the that category. Thus, the moon is in the poetic realm, matter before being form. It is a fluid that penetrates the dreamer. Man in his natural and elemental poetic state is not disquieted by the moon that he sees every night until it comes bodily to him. Sleeping or waking draws near and charms him with silent movements, or fascinates him with the evil or sweetness of its touch. He does not retain from this the visual representation. He does not retain from this the visual representation, say, of the wandering orb of light, or of a demonic being that somehow belongs to it. But at first, he has in him only the dynamic stirring image of the moon's effect streaming through his body. It could not be better described. The moon is an influence in the astrological sense of the word, a cosmic matter which, at certain hours, impregnates the universe and gives it a material unity. However, the cosmic nature of organic memories will not surprise us if we understand that material imagination is a primary imagination. The images, it imagines the creation and life of things along with their vital lights, with those certainties born by an immediate sensation that it imagines by heeding the great lessons in coenesthesis, coenesthesis given by our organs. Coenesthesis. It imagines the creation and life of things along with their vital lights, with those certainties born by an immediate sensation. That is, it imagines by heeding the great lessons in coenesthesis given by our organs. We have already been surprised by the astonishingly direct quality of Poe's imagination, his geography, that is, his method of dreaming about the earth, bears the same stamp. Therefore, it is by giving material imagination its true function that we shall understand the profound meaning of Gordon Pym's exploration in the polar seas, seas which Poe, need it be added, never visited. Poe describes the singular sea in these terms. The heat of the water was now truly remarkable, and its color was undergoing a rapid change, being no longer transparent, but of a milky consistency and hue. Let us note in passing that the water becomes milky, according to the remark made above, by losing its transparency. In our immediate vicinity, it was usually smooth, never so rough as to endanger the canoe, but we were frequently surprised at perceiving to our right and left at different distances sudden and extensive agitations of the surface. 3 days later, the explorer of the South Pole writes again. The heat of the water was extreme, even unpleasant to the touch, and its milky hue was more evident than ever. It is easy to see that we are no longer dealing with the sea taken as a whole in its general aspect, but with water taken as matter, as a substance that is both warm and white. It is white because it is warm. Its warmth is noticed before its whiteness. From all evidence, instead of a sight, it is a memory that inspires the narrator. a happy memory, the most tranquil and the most soothing of memories, the memory of breast milk, of the maternal lap. Everything points to it in a passage that closes by recalling the sweet abandon, the well satisfied child who falls asleep on his nurse's breast. The polar winter appeared to be coming on, but coming without its terrors. I felt a numbness of body and mind, a dreaminess of sensation, but this was all. The harsh realism of the polar winter is conquered. Imaginary milk has fulfilled its function. It has numbed soul and body. The explorer is thenceforth a dreamer who remembers. Direct images, often very beautiful in an internal, material way, have the same origins. For example, what is the river to Paul Claudel? It is the liquefaction of the earth's substance. It is the eruption of liquid water rooted in its most secret folds, of milk under the sucking of the ocean which is nursing. Here again, which is governing, form or matter. The geographical design, the geographical design of the river, which the rounded hillock of its delta, or the liquid itself, milk, the liquid of organic psychoanalysis, the geographical design of the river, which the rounded hillock of its delta, or the liquid itself, milk. Let me read that as a whole. Here again, which is governing, form or matter, the geographical design of the river with the rounded hillock of its delta, or the liquid itself, milk, the liquid of organic psychoanalysis. And through what interagent will the reader participate in the poet's image, if not through an essentially substantial interpretation, by dynamizing in a human way the mouth of the river fastened to the ocean, which is nursing? Once more, we see that all great substantial values are valorized. Human movements rise without difficulty to the cosmic level. There are 1,000 ways of going from the imagination of milk to the imagination of the ocean, because milk is a vague value for the imagination that finds release on every occasion. Again, it is Claudel who writes, and the milk of which Isaiah says it is in us like a flood. Has milk not overwhelmed us, submerged us in a boundless happiness? In the spectacle of a heavy, warm, productive summer rain, one might find the living image of a downpour of milk. The same material image, well anchored in men's hearts, has endless variety in its derived forms. Mistral sings in Mireille, there comes a time when the sea calms its proud bosom and breathes slowly through all of its breasts. Such is the spectacle of the milky sea that is gently soothed. It is the mother with an immeasurable breast and an immeasurable heart. It is because water, for the unconscious, is milk that it has so often in the course of the history of scientific thought been taken for an eminently nutritious principle. Nutritious principle. Let us not forget that for the prescient, let us not forget for the pre-scientific mind, nutrition, far from being a function to be explained, is an explicative function between pre-scientific and scientific thought. There will occur an inversion in the explanation of the biological and the chemical. The scientific mind will try to explain the biological by the chemical. Pre-scientific thought, closer to the unconscious thought, explained the chemical through the biological. Thus, the digestion of chemical substances in a digester was, for the alchemist, an operation of remarkable clarity. Chemistry, thus paralleled by simple biological intuitions, is, in a way, doubly natural. It rises without difficulty from microcosm to macrocosm, from man to the universe. The water that quenches man's thirst overflows the earth. The pre-scientific mind thinks concretely about images that we take for mere metaphors. It really thinks that the earth drinks water. Fabricius, in the middle of the 18th century, conceived of water as a servant to nourish the earth and the air. It passes then to the rank of nutritive element. It is the greatest of the elementary material values. 4. To be complete, a psychoanalysis of beverages must present the dialectic of alcohol and milk, of fire and water, of Dionysius against Cybele. Then it becomes clear that the eclecticism of conscious and regulated life is impossible to sustain after these revaluations of the unconscious are lived through. After one becomes aware of the primary values of material imagination. For example, in Henry of Offerdingen, Novalis tells us that in a house, Henry's father once asked for a glass of wine or milk, as if, in a story so full of mythic suggestion, the dynamized unconscious could hesitate. What a hermaphroditicness. What a hermaphroditic weakness. Hermaphroditic weakness. HERMAPHRODITIC. Hermaphroditic weakness. Only in life, where politeness masks basic needs, can one ask for a glass of wine or milk. But in dream and true myths, one always asks for what is desired. One always knows what one wants to drink, always drinks the same thing. What one drinks in a dream is an infallible clue to the nature of the dreamer. A more thorough psychoanalysis of material imagination than this one should be undertaken to develop a psychology of drinks and filters. PHILTERS. Filters. Almost 50 years ago, Maurice Caraft was already saying, the love potion is, in reality, the very image of the great mystery of life, the plastic representation of love. It is imperceptible birth, its powerful evolution, and its passage from dream to full consciousness, through which, finally, its tragic essence appears to us. And opposing the literary critics who reproached In opposing the literary critics who reproached Wagner for the intervention of that medicine craft, rightly object. The filter's magic power has no physical role. Its role is purely psychological. The word psychological, however, is too inclusive a word. At the time Faraf wrote, psychology did not have at its disposal the many techniques for study that it has today. The zone of forgetfulness is much more differentiated than anyone 50 years ago would have imagined it could be. The imagination of filters is therefore subject to multiple variations. I cannot hope to develop it along the way. My task in this book is to stress fundamental matters. Let me then stress only the fundamental beverage. Intuition of the fundamental beverage. Water nourishing as milk and conceived of as the nutritive element, the one obviously digested, is so powerful that perhaps through water, thus maternalized, the fundamental notion of the element is best understood. The liquid element then appears as an ultra milk, milk from the mother of mothers. In his five great odes, Paul Claudel somehow bullies his metaphors into going in a spirited, direct way to the essence. Your springs are not springs at all. The element itself, primary matter, it is the mother that I need. I tell you, of what import is the activity of waters in the universe, says the poet, drunk with primary essence. Of what import the transformations and distribution of the waters? I want none of your waters which have been arranged, gathered up by the sun, filtered, distilled, and distributed by the energy of mountains, corruptible, flowing. Claudel takes up the liquid element that flows no more, carrying the dialectic of being into the substance itself. He wants to seize the element as it is finally brought under control, embraced, held fast, integrated into ourselves. After the Heracliteanism of visual forms comes the strong realism of an essential fluid, a full softness, a warmth equal to our own, but which still warms us, a fluid that spreads out but still leaves us with the joy of total possession. In short, real water, maternal milk, the perpetual mother, the mother. 5. This substantial valorization that makes water an inexhaustible milk, the milk of Mother Nature, is not the only valorization that characterizes water as profoundly feminine. In every man's life, or at least in every man's dream life, a second woman appears, the beloved or the wife. The second woman is also projected upon nature. The woman landscape takes its place beside the mother landscape. Of course, the two projected natures may interfere with or screen each other, but there are cases in which they can be distinguished. I shall cite an instance in which the woman nature projection is very clear. In fact, a dream of Novalis even brings us new reasons for affirming water's feminine substance. After dipping his hands and moistening his lips in a basin that he discovers in a dream, Novalis is seized by an uncontrollable desire to bathe. No vision invites him. It is the substance itself which he has touched with his hands and lips which summons him. It summons him materially by virtue, it seems, of a magic participation. The dreamer undresses and goes down into the basin. It is only then that images come. They emerge from the matter. They are born as if from a seed, from a primitive sensual reality, from a drunkenness that cannot yet be projected. From all sides unknown, images surged upwards, images which blended into one another to become visible beings and to surround the dreamer, so that each wave of the delicious element stuck closely to him like a sweet breast. It seemed that there was dissolved in this water a group of charming maidens who, for an instant, became corporeal again at this contact with the young man. It is a marvelous passage, manifesting a profoundly materialized imagination, where water in its volume and mass, not simply in the fairy world of its reflections, appears like dissolved maiden, like the liquid essence of maiden. Feminine forms are born from the very substance of water. At the touch of a man's breast, when it seems man's desire becomes specific, but a voluptuous substance precedes the forms of voluptuousness. We would misunderstand one of the peculiar characteristics of Novalis' imagination if we too readily attributed to him a swan complex. To do that would require proof that the primitive images are visible ones. Now, it does not seem that these visions are active. The charming maidens are quickly redissolved in the element, and the dreamer, drunk with joy, continues his journey without experiencing any adventure with the ephemeral maidens. With the ephemeral maidens, dream beings in Novalis' work then do not exist except when they are touched. Water becomes woman only against the breast. It does not provoke distant images. This very peculiar physical characteristic of certain of Novalis' dreams deserves a name, I think. Instead of saying that Novalis is a seer who sees the invisible, I would rather say that he is a toucher who touches the untouchable, intangible, or unreal. He plunges more deeply than any other dreamer. His dream is a dream within a dream, not in the ethereal sense, but in the profound one. He falls asleep in his sleep. He lives a sleep within a sleep. Who has not desired, if he has not lived, this second sleep in a more hidden cryptic? Then the dream begins. The dream starts, then the dream beings come even closer to us. They come and touch us, come and live in our flesh like a hidden fire. As I have already indicated in my psychoanalysis of fire, Novalis' imagination is governed by a calorism, that is, by its desire for a hot, soft, warm, enveloping, protective substance, by the need for a matter that surrounds the entire being and penetrates it intimately. It is an imagination that develops in depth. Phantoms come out of the substance like vaporous, but full forms, like ephemeral beings, but beings that could be touched, to whom a little of the profound warmth of intimate life has been communicated. All of Novalis' dreams bear the mark of this depth. The dream in which Novalis finds the marvelous water, this water that offers maiden everywhere, offers maiden in the partitive, is not a dream of great scope, of wide vision. It is at the bottom of a grotto, in the bosom of the earth, that the marvelous lake, which guards its soft warmth, jealously, is found. It is at the bottom of a grotto in the bosom of the earth that the marvelous lake which guards its soft warmth jealously is found. The visual images born from so profoundly valorized a water will, however, have no consistency. They will melt into one another, keeping even in this the hydrous and calorific mark of their origin. Only the matter will remain. For such an imagination, everything is lost in the realm of the formal image, but nothing is lost in the realm of the material image. Phantoms truly born from substance do not need to draw out their activity. It is in vain that the water clings to the dreamer like a soft breast. The dreamer will ask for no more. In fact, he enjoys this substantial possession. How could he fail to experience a certain disdain for forms? Forms in themselves are closed. Nudity that is too well defined is frigid, closed and enclosed within its lines. Consequently, for the dreamer drawn to heat, imagination is a purely material imagination. It is of matter that he dreams. It is its heat that he needs. Of what importance are fugitive visions when, in the secrecy of night, in the solitude of the shadowy grotto, reality can be grasped in its essence, in its weight, in its substantial life? Such material images, soft and hot, warm and humid, cure us. They belong to that imaginary medicine so wonderfully true and forcefully dreamed that it retains a considerable influence over our unconscious life. For centuries, health was considered to be a balance between radical humidity and natural warmth. An old author, Lessius, who died in 1623, expresses it this way: humidity in life, humidity in which life principally consists, is consumed together with the inbred heat. For whilst the humidity or moisture of the body keeps on wafting, so does its heat equally abate too. And as soon as its humidity is once quite gone or dried up, does its heat also jointly extinguish along with it, just the same as a lamp or taper goes out for want of fuel. Water and warmth are the two things vital to our well-being. We must know how to be economical with them. We must understand that one tempers the other. It seems that Novalis' dreams and all his reveries are an endless search for the union of a radical humidity and a diffuse warmth. We can explain the beautiful one-rick equilibrium of Novalis' work in this way. Novalis recognized a healthy dream, a dream that slept well. Novalis' dreams go to such depth that they may seem exceptional. All the same, by searching a little and looking beneath formal images, one can find them in their rudimentary forms in certain metaphors. For example, in a line by Ernest Renan, we shall recognize a trace of a Novalisian phantasm. In fact, in his studies on religious history, Renan comments on the epithet Kaliparthenos of the beautiful maidens, given the river by calmly saying that these waters turned into maidens. Though the image be turned and turned again, no formal characteristics can be found. No picture can legitimize it. Should we challenge a psychologist of forms? Should we challenge a psychologist of forms, he would not be able to explain this image. It can be explained only by material imagination. The waves receive their whiteness and their limpidity for an internal matter. This matter is dissolved, maiden. Water has taken on the property of dissolved feminine substance. Water has taken on the property of dissolved feminine substance. If you want an immaculate water, have virgins dissolved in it. If you want the seas of Melanesia, have negresses dissolved in it. There can be found in certain rites pertaining to the immersion of virgins a trace of this material component. St. Thieves recalls that at Langley Lampert on the Gold Coast, in times of drought, 9 maidens entered the basin of the fountain at Lang and emptied it completely in order to obtain rain. And he adds, the rite of immersion is accompanied here by a purification of the springs basin by pure beings. These girls who go down into the fountain are virgins. They force the water to become pure by a real constraint, by a material participation. They force the water to become pure by a real constraint, by a material participation. That line before was interesting, but we're going to breeze past it. I'm not talking about the one that I was scratching. In Edgar Quinet's Ahasverus, is not an English word. In Edgar Quinet's Ahasverus, also, there is once again an impression that is almost a visual image, but whose matter is related to Novalisian matter. How many times, while swimming in an isolated gulf, has I fervently pressed the waves to my breast? The water all awry the water all awry hung on my neck, the foam kissed my lips, around me perfumed sparks flew. As can easily be seen, the feminine form is not yet born, but it is about to be born, for feminine matter is there in its entirety. A wave pressed to the bosom with so warm a love is not far from being a palpitating breast. If we are not always attuned to the life of such images, if we do not grasp them directly in their clearly material aspect, it is because psychologists have not given material imagination the attention it deserves. All our literary education has been limited to cultivating formal imagination, clear imagination. On the other hand, since dreams are most often studied only for the development of their forms, no one realizes that above all, they are mime, the life of matter. that their life is strongly rooted in the material elements. With a succession of forms, we do not have what we need for measuring the dynamics of transformation. The best that can be expected is a description of this transformation from the outside, like a pure kinetics. This kinetics cannot appreciate forces, drives, and aspirations from within. The dynamics of dreams cannot be understood if we separate it from the dynamic quality of the material elements that dreams work over. We are looking at the mobility of the forms of dreams from the wrong perspective if we forget its internal dynamic quality. In the final analysis, forms are shifting because the unconscious becomes disinterested in them. What binds the unconscious, what imposes a dynamic law on it in the realm of images, is life in the depths of a material element. Novalis' dream is a dream formed while meditating on a water that enfolds and penetrates the dreamer, on a water that brings a warm, massive well being with volume and destiny, with volume and density. Novalis' dream is a dream formed while meditating on a water that enfolds and penetrates the dreamer, on a water that brings a warm, massive well being with volume and density. He is charmed not by image but by substances. That is why Novalis' dream can be used as a marvelous narcotic. It is virtually a psychic substance for calming every disturbed psyche. He who is willing to meditate on the passage from Novalis to which I have referred will realize that it sheds new light on an important point of dream psychology. 6. In Novalis' dream, there is also a characteristic barely hinted at, but nevertheless active, and we must give it its full meaning in order to have a complete psychology of Hydrus dreams. Novalis' dream is, in fact, one of many in the category of dreams of rocking. When he enters the marvelous water, the dreamer's first impression is that of resting among the clouds in the purple of the evening. A little later, he seems to be stretched out on a soft lawn. What, then, is the true matter that carries the dreamer? Is it neither cloud nor soft lawn? It is water. It is neither cloud or It is neither cloud nor soft lawn. It is water. Cloud and lawn are the expressions. Water is the impression. In Novalis' dream, water is at the heart of the experience. It continues to rock the dreamer while he is resting on the riverbank. This is an example of the constant activity of an one material element. Of the four elements, water is the only one that can rock. It is the rocking element. This is one more feature of its feminine makeup. It rocks like a mother. The unconscious does not formulate Archimedes' principle, it lives it. In his dreams, the bather who is not looking for anything, who does not wake up shouting Eureka like a psychoanalyst, astonished by the smallest discovery, who finds night his own setting, loves and knows the lightness acquired in water. He enjoys it directly like a dream knowledge. That knowledge, as we see, as we shall see, which opens up an infinity for him. He enjoys it directly like a dream knowledge. That knowledge, as we shall see, which opens up an infinity for him. The drifting bark gives the same delights, brings up the same reveries. It gives the mentrine with no hesitation, one of the most mysterious sensual pleasures in nature. Innumerable literary references easily prove to us that the enchanting bark, the romantic bark, is, in certain respects, a rediscovered cradle. During long, calm, carefree hours, lengthy hours, when lying in the bottom of a lone bark, we contemplate the sky. To what memory do you give us over? All images are absent, the sky is empty, but the movement is there, living, smooth, rhythmic, in a movement scarcely perceptible and quite silent. Water carries us, water rocks us, water puts us to sleep. Water gives us back to our mother. In such a general theme, with as few formal details as the dream of rocking, material imagination nevertheless leaves its specific mark. To be rocked on the waves is, for a dreamer, the occasion for a specific reverie, which deepens as it becomes monotonous. Michelet has remarked on it indirectly. No more space and no more time, no more fixed points that can catch our attention. And then there is no more attention. Deep is the reverie, and deeper, an ocean of dreams on the smooth ocean of water. Through this image, Michelet tries to depict the lure of a habit that relaxes our attention. The metaphoric perspective can be reversed, for being rocked on water truly relaxes our attention. Then we understand that reverie in a bark is not the same as reverie in a rocking chair. This reverie in a bark governs a special habit pertaining to dreams, a reverie that really is a habit. For example, a very important component of Montaigne's poetry would be lost if we were to remove the habit of dreaming on the waters. This reverie sometimes has an intimacy of strange depth. Balzac does not hesitate to say, the voluptuous rocking of a bark vaguely imitates the thoughts that float in a soul. A beautiful image of relaxed and happy thought. These rocked reveries and dreams multiply in the same way as all dreams and all reveries that are attached to a material element, to a natural force. After them come other dreams that continue the impression of extraordinary gentleness. They give happiness a taste for infinity. They give happiness a taste for infinity. I like that line. It is near water and on water that we learn to sail on clouds, to swim in the sky. Balzac continues in the same passage. The river was like a patch along which we flew. Water invites us on an imaginary journey. Mentrine also expresses this material continuity. Mentrine also expresses this material continuity of water and sky when, eyes wandering over the luminous immensity of the waters which mingled with the luminous immensity of the sky, he no longer knows where the sky begins or the lake ends. It seemed to me that I was swimming in pure ether and being engulfed by the universal ocean. But The inner joy in which I was swimming was 1,000 times more infinite, more luminous, more incommensurable than the atmosphere which I was thus mingled. It seemed to me that I was swimming in pure ether and being engulfed by the universal ocean. But the inner joy in which I was swimming was 1,000 times more infinite, more luminous, and more incommensurable than the atmosphere with which I was thus mingled. Nothing must be forgotten if we want to take the psychological measure of such texts. Man is transported because he is carried. He flies up toward the sky because he is truly lightened by his blissful reverie. When one has received the benefits of a strongly dynamicized material image, when one imagines with the substance and the life of a being, all images come to life. Novalis thus progresses from the dream of rocking to the dream of carrying. For Novalis, night itself is a matter that carries us, an ocean that rocks our life. Night carries thee like a mother.